when a ruthless billionaire deliberately tries to humiliate a young professional in front of powerful clients. He never expected her to fight back with such fierce courage. What starts as a corporate power play becomes an intense battle of wills that will change both their lives forever. This emotionally charged story explores themes of power, vulnerability, and the dangerous attraction between two people who refuse to back down. Love is tested, secrets are revealed, choices change everything. Are you ready for a story you can't stop watching? Comment where you're watching from, smash that like, subscribe, and let's begin this unforgettable journey. The marble. Lobby of Blackwood Industries gleamed under crystal chandeliers, each surface polished to mirror perfection. Victoria Sterling clutched her portfolio against her chest, the leather warm from her sweating palms. The click of her modest heels echoed in the vast space, swallowed by the murmur of expensive conversations and the soft jazz trickling from hidden speakers. She had 30 minutes to save her company. Sterling Communications was hemorrhaging. Clients in this presentation to Gabriel Blackwood represented their last shot at survival. Victoria had spent 3 sleepless nights perfecting every slide, every word, every gesture. Her reflection in the elevator doors showed dark circles under determined brown eyes, her simple black dress, a stark contrast to the designer suits flowing. Around her, the elevator climbed toward the executive floor, and Victoria's stomach dropped with each passing number. 28, 29, 30. The doors whispered open to reveal a reception area. It screamed power and intimidation. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of the city below, where ordinary people lived ordinary lives, blissfully unaware of the corporate battles fought in towers like this one. Sterling. A woman in a pristine white blouse appeared, her smile sharp as a blade. "Mr. Blackwood will see you now." Victoria followed her down a hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than most people's houses. Her heart hammered against her ribs as they approached mahogany double doors that seemed designed to dwarf anyone who dared approach. The conference room beyond was a temple to success. 12 executives sat around a table that could have hosted a small nation's peace treaty. At the head sat Gabriel Blackwood himself, his steel-gray eyes cutting through her the moment she entered. His black suit was immaculate, his dark hair styled with military precision, and his jaw set in a line that suggested he had already decided her fate. "Gentlemen," Gabriel's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Allow me to introduce Victoria Sterling from Sterling Communications, the company that thinks they can solve our marketing challenges." The slight emphasis on thinks made Victoria's blood chill. This wasn't just a presentation. This was an execution, and she was the condemned. "Mr. Blackwood," Victoria began, setting up her laptop with hands that refused to shake. "Thank you for this opportunity. I believe our consumer psychology approach can revolutionize how Blackwood Industries connects with emerging markets." Gabriel leaned back in his chair. A predator watching prey. Consumer psychology? How fascinating. "Tell me, Miss Sterling, what makes you think a small firm like yours understands the psychology of billion-dollar decisions?" The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Victoria felt 12 pairs of eyes dissecting her, waiting for her to crumble under Gabriel's casual cruelty. She had heard the stories about his reputation for destroying careers with surgical precision, but experiencing it firsthand was like standing in the path of an avalanche. "Because," Victoria said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest, "understanding people isn't about the size of your bank account. It's about recognizing that behind every purchase, every choice, every decision, there's a human being with fears, dreams and desires that can't be bought." Gabriel's gray eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "How poetic. And what exactly do you think drives my decisions, Miss Sterling?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Victoria could feel the trap closing around her, could sense that. Her next words would determine not just the fate of her company, but something much more personal. "Control," she said quietly. "You make decisions based on the need to control every variable, every outcome, every person in your orbit. It's effective for business, but it leaves you completely disconnected from the very people you're trying to reach." The silence that followed was deafening. Gabriel's face had gone completely still, a mask of ice that revealed nothing and everything at once. Interesting theory, he said, his voice dangerously soft. But I'm afraid your services won't be needed. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting before it had truly begun. The other executives began shuffling papers, already moving on to the next item on their agenda. Victoria felt her world tilting, felt 3 years of building her company crashing down around her. But instead of accepting defeat, something inside her snapped. No, the word cut through the corporate politeness like a blade through silk. Every head in the room turned toward Victoria, who had risen from her chair with the kind of quiet fury that precedes storms. Gabriel paused halfway to the door, his broad shoulders tensing beneath his perfectly tailored jacket. When he turned back, his gray eyes held a warning that had made grown men apologize for breathing in his presence. "Excuse me?" I said no. Victoria stepped around the conference table, her modest heels suddenly sounding like gunshots on the polished floor. "You don't get to dismiss me like some intern who wandered into the wrong building. You called this meeting?" "Presentation. The least you can do is show enough respect to let me finish it." The executives around the table shifted uncomfortably, their expensive suits suddenly feeling like armor that might not be thick enough for what was coming. Gabriel Blackwood wasn't just powerful. He was legendary for his ability to destroy careers. With a single phone call, "Miss Sterling," Gabriel's voice carried the kind of deadly calm that preceded corporate executions. "I suggest you collect your things and leave before you say something you'll regret." "The only thing I regret," Victoria shot back, taking another step closer, "is wasting 3 sleepless nights preparing for a man who's too afraid of his own insecurities to listen to genuine advice." The temperature in the room seemed to plummet. Gabriel's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking beneath the carefully controlled surface. Victoria could see the exact moment when his legendary composure began to crack. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You're nothing. A small-time consultant from a failing company, desperate enough to come here and psychoanalyze me like some amateur therapist. You think you understand me? You think your little insights into human nature give you the right to stand in my boardroom?" And the slap echoed through the conference room like a thunderclap. Victoria's hand stung from the impact, but the shock on Gabriel's face was worth every burning nerve in her palm. 12 of the most powerful executives in the city sat frozen, their mouths agape, as if they were witnessing the laws of physics being rewritten in real time. Nobody touched Gabriel Blackwood. Nobody interrupted him. And absolutely nobody had ever struck him in his own boardroom. "That," Victoria said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins, "is for treating me like I'm invisible. For assuming that because my company is small, my insights are worthless, and for being so wrapped up in your own power that you've forgotten what it feels like to be human." Gabriel's hand had moved instinctively to his cheek, where a faint red mark was already forming. His gray eyes had gone completely dark, like storm clouds gathering before a hurricane. But beneath the shock and the rage, Victoria glimpsed something else, something that looked almost like recognition. "Security," he said quietly, never taking his eyes off Victoria. "Don't bother," Victoria replied, already gathering her materials. "I'm leaving. But before I go, let me tell you something about consumer psychology that you clearly don't understand. People don't buy products from companies they respect. They buy from companies they trust. And trust can't be bought, controlled, or intimidated into existence. It has to be earned." She snapped her laptop closed and tucked it under her arm, her movements sharp and precise. The executives around the table were still frozen, as if sudden movements might trigger another explosion. "You want to know what drives your decisions, Mr. Blackwood? Fear. Fear that if you let anyone get close enough to see the real you, they'll discover that all this power is just armor protecting someone who's terrified of being vulnerable." Gabriel's face had gone completely white, his knuckles clenched, so tightly they were bloodless. But he said nothing, just watched as Victoria walked toward the door with her head held high. At the threshold, she paused and looked back one final time. "When you're ready to have a real conversation, instead of a power play, you know where to find me." The mahogany doors closed behind her with a soft click, leaving 12 executives and 1 billionaire CEO sitting in absolute silence, the air still crackling with the electricity of what had just transpired. Gabriel's phone was buzzing within minutes. his assistant's voice filtering through the intercom with barely concealed panic. "Sir, there's a situation. The Henderson client just called. They heard about the meeting and they want to know if they can hire Ms. Sterling directly." Victoria's apartment was a study in organized chaos. Financial documents covered every surface of her coffee table, each one a reminder of how close Sterling Communications was to collapse. The cheap wine in her glass had gone warm an hour ago, but she barely noticed. Her laptop screen glowed with rejection emails from potential clients, each one another nail in her company's coffin. The knock at her door came at 11:47 p.m. Victoria peered through the peephole, expecting to see Mrs. Chen from next door complaining about noise again. Instead, she found herself staring at Gabriel Blackwood's perfectly pressed shirt and steel-gray eyes. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she yanked the door open, not bothering to hide her shock. "What the hell are you doing here?" Gabriel stood in the hallway of her modest building, looking as out of place as a Bentley in a junkyard. His black coat was spotted with rain, and for the first time since she'd met him, his composure seemed slightly fractured. "We need to talk. It's almost midnight, and you show up at my apartment." "That's not talking. That's stalking." Victoria crossed her arms, very aware that she was wearing old pajama pants and a university sweatshirt that had seen better decades. "May I come in?" Something in his voice made her step aside, despite every instinct screaming at her to slam the door in his face. Gabriel entered her small living space, his presence immediately making the room feel claustrophobic. His eyes swept over the financial chaos on her coffee table, the stack of unpaid bills, the rejection letters. "You're broke," he observed without judgment. "Sterling Communications is experiencing temporary cash flow challenges," Victoria replied stiffly. "You're 3 months behind on rent. You've got $17,000 in outstanding invoices. And your business account has $47 in it." Gabriel's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were reading a grocery list. "I had my people run the numbers." Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. "You investigated me?" "I investigate everyone who interests me." Gabriel moved to her window, gazing out at the city lights below. "What I found was fascinating. Top of your class at Northwestern, marketing degree with a psychology minor, started your own firm at 25 with nothing but determination and a credit card. You've built something impressive, Victoria." The way he said her name sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine. "Then why are you here? To gloat? To watch me fail in person?" Gabriel turned from the window, and in the dim light of her apartment, he looked different. Younger, somehow more human. "I'm here because you were right." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they wanted to cross. "About what specifically?" Victoria asked, her voice carefully neutral. "About the fear. About the control. About the fact that I've spent so long building walls that I've forgotten what it feels like to connect with anything real." Gabriel's gray eyes found hers. "Oh, nobody has spoken to me the way you did today in 15 years. Nobody has called me on my bullshit and lived to tell about it. So you tracked down my address to thank me for slapping you." A ghost of a smile crossed Gabriel's lips. "I tracked down your address because I want to make you an offer." Victoria's stomach tightened. "What kind of offer?" "Marry me." The words hit her like a physical blow. Victoria stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "I need a wife for 6 months. There's a merger worth $2 billion on the line, and the CEO of the other company is what you might call traditional. He won't do business with unmarried men. Says it shows a lack of commitment and stability." Gabriel's voice was clinical, businesslike. "I need someone who can play the part convincingly. Someone intelligent enough to handle the social requirements and strong enough not to be intimidated by the media attention." Victoria felt like she'd been punched in the gut. "You want me to be your fake wife? I want you to be my very real wife with a very clear expiration date?" 6 months, Victoria. "In exchange, I'll pay off every debt Sterling Communications has, set you up with enough clients to keep you busy for the next 5 years, and write you a personal check for $5 million. The number hung in the air between them like a loaded gun. $5 million. Enough to save her company, pay off her student loans, maybe even buy a real apartment instead of this shoebox. "Why me?" she whispered. Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her skin burn. "Because you're the first person in 15 years who's seen through my armor. Because you slapped me in my own boardroom and walked away with your dignity intact. Because you're not impressed by my money or intimidated by my reputation." He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features. "And because I think you might be the only person brave enough to survive being married to me, even temporarily." Victoria sank onto her couch, her mind reeling. It was insane. It's impossible. Completely ridiculous. It was also her only shot at survival. "There would be rules," Gabriel continued, his voice soft but firm. "Public appearances as needed. You'd move into my penthouse for authenticity. We'd need to sell the relationship convincingly, which means acting like a couple in public." "Acting," Victoria repeated. "Acting," Gabriel confirmed, but something in his eyes suggested the lines might not be as clear as he was pretending. Victoria looked around her apartment, at the bills and the rejection letters and the dreams slowly dying on her coffee table. Then she looked at Gabriel Blackwood, standing in her living room like a beautiful, dangerous promise. "I need time to think about it. You have until tomorrow at noon. After that, I find someone else." He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. "Victoria, for what it's worth, I hope you say yes." The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Victoria alone with the most impossible decision of her life. 3 months into their marriage, Victoria had learned to navigate Gabriel's world with the grace of a diplomat and the instincts of a survivor. The penthouse had become home, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city that never failed to take her breath away. She had her own office, her own space, and a relationship with her husband that walked the razor's edge between business arrangement and something far more dangerous. The charity gala was their biggest performance. Yet, Victoria stood beside Gabriel in the ballroom of the Waldorf, her champagne-colored gown flowing around her like liquid gold. Diamonds borrowed from Gabriel's family vault caught the light at her throat, and her hair was styled in an elegant updo that had taken 3 hours to perfect. Victoria had learned to place her hand on Gabriel's arm with just the right amount of possessive affection, to laugh at his jokes with genuine warmth, to gaze at him like a woman deeply in love. The problem was, somewhere along the way, the acting had started to feel real. "You're beautiful tonight," Gabriel murmured near her ear as they posed for photographs, his breath warm against her skin. "Part of the job," Victoria replied, but her pulse quickened at the compliment. Over the past 3 months, she had seen sides of Gabriel that the business world never witnessed. The way he made coffee for her every morning, remembered that she hated mushrooms, and listened with genuine interest when she talked about her work. The way he'd held her when she cried over her father's birthday, the first one since his death 2 years ago. The way he looked at her sometimes, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. Tonight, Gabriel seemed distant, his smiles forced, his touches perfunctory. When Margaret Rothschild, the mayor's wife, approached them with her usual arsenal of probing questions, Victoria felt Gabriel tense beside her. "Gabriel, darling," Margaret purred, "you simply must tell me how you met this enchanting wife of yours." They had rehearsed their origin story dozens of times, had it down to the smallest detail. But Gabriel's hesitation was like a crack in a dam. "We met at a business conference," he said, his voice slightly off. "Victoria was presenting on consumer psychology." "Romantic," Margaret replied, but her eyes were sharp with suspicion. "And when exactly was this conference?" "I don't recall seeing any announcements about Gabriel Blackwood getting married in the society pages." Victoria felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Something was wrong. Gabriel was never unprepared, never caught off guard, unless he wanted to be. "Excuse me," Gabriel said suddenly. "I need to make a phone call." He disappeared into the crowd, leaving Victoria alone with Margaret's calculating stare and a growing sense of dread. It was then that she saw him. Marcus Chen, her former business partner and the man who had stolen half her clients before disappearing with their joint accounts 2 years ago. He was standing near the bar, impeccably dressed, and talking animatedly with a group of investors. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and Marcus smiled like a shark scenting blood. Victoria's world tilted sideways. She found Gabriel in his study an hour later, having fled the gala with a fabricated migraine. He was standing at the window, still in his tuxedo, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He didn't turn when she entered. "Marcus Chen is at the gala," Victoria said without preamble. Gabriel's shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. "I know, you know?" Victoria stepped closer, her evening gown rustling like the wings of a dying bird. "Gabriel Marcus is the reason my company almost failed. He embezzled money from our joint accounts and disappeared. Seeing him here tonight at a gala you organized, that doesn't seem like a coincidence." Gabriel finally turned, and the expression on his face made Victoria's blood freeze. There was no surprise, no confusion, no innocent explanation. There was only the cold, calculated mask she had thought he'd dropped for her. "It's not a coincidence," he said quietly. The words hit her like a physical blow. Victoria gripped the back of a chair to keep from swaying. "What are you saying?" Gabriel set down his whiskey glass and moved toward his desk, pulling out a manila folder. He held it out to her with steady hands. "Marcus works for me now. Has for the past year. I needed someone with inside knowledge of small marketing firms. Someone who could help me identify which companies would be most vulnerable to acquisition." Victoria stared at the folder without taking it, her mind struggling to process what she was hearing. Sterling Communications was never randomly selected for that presentation. Gabriel continued, his voice clinical and detached. "I knew exactly how desperate you were, exactly how much debt you carried, exactly how much you needed saving. Marcus provided all the details." The room spun around Victoria like a carousel in hell. "You're saying you orchestrated everything? The meeting, the presentation, even Marcus bankrupting my company? I simply recognized an opportunity when he came to me for a job." Gabriel's gray eyes were empty of emotion. "You were perfect, Victoria. Intelligent, desperate, attractive enough to sell the role. Proud enough that you'd never suspect you were being played." Victoria felt like she was drowning in ice water. The marriage proposal, that was all planned too? The merger is real? Hartwell Industries does require their partners to be married? But I could have found any number of women willing to play the part. Gabriel's voice softened slightly, which somehow made it worse. "I chose you because you were convenient, because I knew you'd have no choice but to say yes." The folder slipped from Victoria's numb fingers, scattering photographs and financial documents across the Persian rug. Pictures of her apartment, copies of her bank statements, detailed reports on her daily routines. She had been studied, catalogued, and manipulated like a laboratory specimen. 3 months, she whispered. 3 months of this marriage, of thinking that maybe you actually cared about me, and it was all just business? For the first time since she'd entered the room, Gabriel's composure cracked. Something that might have been pain flashed across his features. "Victoria, I don't." The word came out like a whip crack. "Don't you dare try to explain this away or pretend there was something real here. You used me. You used my desperation, my feelings, my trust." Gabriel took a step toward her, his hand outstretched. "Started his business, but Victoria, what happened between us was part of the performance. It's just like everything else." Victoria's voice was steady, cold, empty. "Tell me, Gabriel, when you held me while I cried about my father, was that method acting? When you made me coffee every morning, was that just maintaining the illusion? When you kissed me last week and told me I was changing you, was that just practice for the cameras?" Gabriel's face had gone white. "You don't understand? Started as manipulation, but somewhere along the way it became real. You became real. What I feel for you is real." Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "What you feel for me? You don't even know what feelings are, Gabriel. You're a machine programmed to acquire and control, and I was just another acquisition." She turned toward the door, her gown trailing behind her like the train of a funeral dress. "Where are you going?" Gabriel's voice carried a note of panic she'd never heard before. Victoria paused at the threshold, her hand on the door frame. When she looked back, her brown eyes were empty of everything except determination. "I'm going to destroy you." 6 weeks after Victoria walked out of Gabriel's penthouse, the Bactor was watching the most spectacular corporate warfare in decades. Sterling Communications had risen from near bankruptcy to become the most sought-after marketing firm. In the city, fueled by Victoria's brilliant strategy and an impressive roster of former Blackwood Industries clients who had followed her expertise, Gabriel sat in his office, staring at the latest financial reports that showed a 15% drop in his company's market value. Victoria had been surgical in her attacks, targeting his weakest clients with precision strikes of superior service and authentic connection. She was beating him at his own game, and they both knew it. The knock on his door came at exactly 3 p.m., just as his assistant had scheduled. Gabriel looked up to see Victoria Sterling Blackwood standing in his doorway, her maiden name restored to her business cards, but her wedding ring still catching the afternoon light. She looked different, stronger, somehow. Her dark hair was shorter now, framing her face in sharp angles that matched the steel in her brown eyes. Her black suit was designer quality, no longer the modest attire of a struggling consultant, but the armor of a woman who had learned to wield power. "Hello, Gabriel." Her voice was calm, controlled, giving away nothing of the woman who had once laughed at his terrible jokes and fallen asleep against his shoulder during late-night movies. "Victoria." Gabriel stood, his hands steady, despite the chaos she had brought into his life. "I assume you're here about the Hartwell merger, among other things." Victoria entered his office with the confidence of someone who knew she held all the cards. "I'm here to make you an offer." Gabriel's gray eyes narrowed. Victoria had acquired 3 of Hartwell Industries' subsidiary companies in the past month, effectively blocking his access to the merger that had started this entire charade. What kind of offer? Victoria moved to his window, gazing out at the city below just as he had done so many times. "I'll give you Hartwell. I'll transfer my subsidiary holdings back to them, clearing the way for your merger. I'll even provide a glowing recommendation for Blackwood Industries." Gabriel felt the catch before she voiced it. "In exchange for what?" Victoria turned from the window, and for a moment, Gabriel glimpsed the woman who had once slapped him in his own boardroom. The woman who had challenged him to be more than his reputation. Marcus Chen. The name fell between them like a gauntlet, thrown down in challenge. "Marcus works for me," Gabriel said carefully. "Marcus destroyed my company and stole money that belonged to people who trusted me. Employees who lost their savings, contractors who never got paid, clients who believed in what we were building." Victoria's voice was steady, but Gabriel could see the fire burning behind her eyes. "I want him prosecuted to the full extent of the law. I want him to face consequences for what he did." Gabriel was quiet for a long moment. Marcus Chen was more than just an employee. He was Gabriel's connection to a network of industrial espionage that had given Blackwood Industries a competitive edge for years. Turning him over to authorities would expose practices that could bring down more than just one man. "You're asking me to destroy my own operation. I'm asking you to do the right thing for once in your life." Victoria stepped closer, close enough that Gabriel could smell her perfume. The same scent that had haunted his penthouse for 6 weeks. "You said what you felt for me became real. Prove it." Gabriel stared into her brown eyes, seeing the test. For what it was, this wasn't just about Marcus Chen or business or even justice. This was about whether Gabriel Blackwood was capable of choosing something other than profit and control. "If I do this," he said quietly, "it won't just be Marcus who goes down. The investigation will uncover things that could put me in prison." Victoria's expression didn't change. "I know." The simplicity of her response hit Gabriel like a physical blow. She knew exactly what she was asking. She knew the price he would pay. She was asking him to pay it anyway. Gabriel moved to his desk, pulled out a secure phone, and dialed a number he had hoped never to use. "This is Gabriel Blackwood. I need to speak to Director Harrison at the FBI. I have information about corporate espionage that he'll want to hear." Victoria watched him make the call that would unravel everything he had built, her face revealing nothing. When he hung up, they stood in silence for a long moment. "They'll be here within the hour," Gabriel said. Gabriel studied her face. searching for some sign of the woman who had once made him believe he could be more than his worst instincts. Will this make us even, Victoria? Will destroying my life balance the scales for what I did to you? Victoria was quiet for so long that Gabriel thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost gentle. This isn't about making us even, Gabriel. This is about giving you the chance to be the man I thought you were becoming. The man who held me when I cried, who remembered how I liked my coffee, who looked at me like I was something precious. Gabriel felt something break open in his chest, something that had been locked away for so long he had forgotten it existed. I was that man. With you, I was that man. I know. Victoria moved toward the door, then paused, her hand on the handle. The thing is, Gabriel, I think you still could be. But not as long as you're building your life on other people's broken dreams. The FBI arrived 47 minutes. Later, Gabriel watched from his office window as Marcus Chen was led away in handcuffs, followed by 3 other executives who had been part of the espionage network. By evening, the news was everywhere. By morning, Gabriel Blackwood would be the most infamous CEO in corporate America. Victoria stood in her new office across town, watching the same news coverage. Her phone had been ringing all day with reporters, lawyers, and business associates trying to understand how she had orchestrated one of the most dramatic corporate reversals in recent memory, but her attention was focused on the envelope. That had been delivered an hour ago by private courier. Her name was written across the front in Gabriel's precise handwriting. Inside, she found a single sheet of paper and a cashier's check for exactly $5 million. The note was brief. Victoria, this is what I owed you from our original agreement. I know money can't undo the betrayal, but it was never about money for you anyway. It was about truth and choice. Ends the belief that people can become better than their worst decisions. You were right about everything. About my fears, my need for control, my inability to connect with anything real. But you were also right about something else. I could be better. I will be better. I'm going to plead guilty to all charges. I'm going to serve whatever time they give me, and when I get out, I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to become the man you saw in me during those 3 months when I felt human for the first time in 15 years. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect a second chance. But I need you to know that loving you changed me in ways that can't be undone, even by prison bars. Thank you for saving me from myself. Gabriel Victoria. Read the letter 3 times before carefully folding it and placing it in her desk drawer. Outside her window, the city sparkled with lights and possibilities. A world where broken things could be repaired. People could choose to become more than their worst mistakes. She picked up her phone and dialed the number for the district attorney's office. This is Victoria Sterling. I'd like to arrange a meeting to discuss Gabriel Blackwood's cooperation with your investigation. I think there might be a way for justice to be served without destroying everything he's trying to rebuild. 2 years later, Gabriel Blackwood walked out of minimum security prison into a world that had moved on without him. Blackwood Industries had been dissolved, its assets distributed to the employees and contractors who had been victimized by the espionage network. Gabriel himself had lost everything except the ability to look at himself in the mirror without flinching. Victoria was waiting by the prison gates, leaning against a modest sedan that was a far cry from the luxury vehicles of their shared past. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair longer now, softer somehow. Hello, Gabriel? Gabriel stopped 10 feet away from her, uncertain and hopeful and terrified all at once. Hello, Victoria. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure either. Until this morning, Victoria pushed off from the car and walked toward him, closing the distance between them with careful steps. But I realized something. The man who wrote me that letter, who chose truth over self-preservation, who spent 2 years in prison learning to be better than his worst impulses, that man deserves a chance. Gabriel's gray eyes searched her face, looking for the anger and betrayal he had carried with him for 24 months. Instead, he found something that looked like forgiveness. I'm not the same man who manipulated you, Gabriel said quietly. Prison has a way of stripping away everything that isn't essential. What's left isn't much, but it's real. I know. Victoria stopped, just out of arm's reach. close enough to see the new lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his dark hair, the way 2 years of genuine remorse had changed the shape of his face. I've been watching your progress through the victim restitution program. The work you've been doing with the families who lost money because of the espionage network. That takes courage. Gabriel looked down at his hands, rough now from prison work, no longer the manicured tools of corporate power. It's the least I could do. The least probably isn't the right word. It's everything I can do, which is exactly why I'm here. Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. Not the elegant embossed cards of Sterling Communications, but something simpler. I'm starting a new venture. Pro bono consulting for small businesses that have been victimized by corporate malfeasance. I need someone who understands how these schemes work from the inside. Gabriel took the card with trembling fingers. Victoria, I can't ask you to take that risk. Hiring me would destroy your reputation. A reputation survived bringing down Gabriel Blackwood. I think it can survive hiring Gabriel Blackwood too. Victoria's mouth curved into the ghost of a smile. Besides, redemption stories are very popular these days. Gabriel looked at the card, then back at Victoria's face. Why? After everything I did to you, why would you offer me this? Victoria was quiet for a long moment, watching a bird circle overhead before settling on the prison fence. Because I learned something in the 2 years you were gone. Love isn't just about the good times, Gabriel. It's about believing someone can be better than their worst day. It's about choosing to see the person they're becoming instead of being trapped by the person they were. Gabriel's breath caught in his throat. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying that the man who held me when I cried about my father is still in there somewhere. The man who made me coffee every morning and listened to my dreams. About changing the business world, the man who chose truth over everything else when it mattered most. Victoria stepped closer, close enough that Gabriel could see the tears gathering in her brown eyes. I'm saying that I'd like to meet that man again, properly this time, without lies or manipulation or billion-dollar mergers hanging over our heads. Gabriel reached out slowly, carefully, giving her every chance to pull away. When his fingers touched her cheek, when she leaned into his palm instead of stepping back, something inside him came back to life. I don't have anything to offer you anymore, he whispered. No penthouse, no private jets, no designer jewelry. I'm unemployed, I'm a convicted felon, and I'll probably never have real money again. Victoria covered his hand with hers, holding it against her face like a promise. Good. Now, I'll know for certain that you're choosing me for the right reasons. Gabriel leaned forward until his forehead touched hers, breathing in the reality of her presence after 2 years of dreaming about this moment. I love you, he said, the words simple and true and completely without calculation. Not because you're convenient, not because you serve a purpose, but because you saw something in me worth saving, and you refused to give up on it, even when I gave up on myself. I love you too, Victoria replied, her voice steady and sure. The real you, the man who chose justice over profit, who spent 2 years paying for his mistakes instead of running from them, who learned that being vulnerable isn't the same as being weak. They stood there in the shadow of the prison walls, 2 people who had found their way back to each other through manipulation and betrayal, through justice and consequence, through the long, difficult work of becoming better than they were. When Gabriel kissed her, it tasted like redemption and second chances, and the promise that some things broken can be made stronger in the healing. 6 months later, Victoria stood before a small gathering of friends and family in the garden, behind her modest house. She wore a simple white dress that had cost less than the jewelry Gabriel had once borrowed for her. She had never felt more beautiful. Gabriel waited at the makeshift altar in a suit from a department store, his gray eyes bright with tears and laughter, and the kind of joy that comes from choosing love over everything else. There were no cameras, no society pages, no billion-dollar mergers riding on their union. There was only Gabriel and Victoria, choosing each other with full knowledge of both their failures and their capacity for growth. As they exchanged vows they had written themselves. Speaking of forgiveness and growth, and the courage it takes to believe in redemption, the afternoon sun caught Victoria's wedding ring. It wasn't a diamond. It was a simple gold band that Gabriel had bought with money earned from his honest work helping other victims of corporate crime. It was perfect. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, when Gabriel kissed Victoria with the desperate gratitude of a man who had been given far more than he deserved, the small crowd erupted in cheers that echoed across the garden and into the city beyond, where broken things could be mended and people could choose to become more than their worst mistakes. Years later, when people asked Victoria about her unusual love story, she would smile and say that sometimes the best foundations are built on the ruins of what came before. That sometimes you have to break completely before you can heal properly. And that sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, love gets a second chance to get it right. Gabriel never did regain his fortune or his corporate empire, but he gained something far more valuable, the knowledge that he was capable of choosing. Love over power, truth over convenience, and redemption over revenge. And every morning when he made coffee for his wife, when he listened to her dreams and held her fears and chose her again and again, he knew he was the richest man alive. The END.